I actually want to. I mentioned Hades Town, and I want to go back to that for a second in this
Right.
idea of when the message doesn't hit the way it's supposed to, and like obviously, there's this idea that some stories, it's just not going to be for everyone,
Right.
and not every story is going to hit the same way for some people. But my biggest frustration with Hades Town is that looking at it and the way it's written, I'm like, I feel like the characters you want me to sympathize with.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about Hades Town?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm like, I feel like the characters you want me to sympathize with are Persephone and Eurydice
Yeah.
as these
Well, just
wronged women.
Persephone, you're always supposed to identify with Persephone, right? I tend not to, but yeah.
I love the story of Hades and Persephone. I like the romanticized version. Don't judge me. But I don't care if you do.
I don't judge. I will never be that.
Yeah.
So I
well, I know you're not going to judge me. I mean,
yeah.
listeners.
Listeners. Like, okay, let's face it. They're all good at judge. They judge everything we freaking say, even the things we don't say. So there we go. Yeah, no.
True. Okay, so listen to it. And I'm like, I know the characters you want. Yeah, I know the characters you want me to sympathize with here, but I don't. It's like, I feel bad for Orpheus because
I think you're supposed to.
Well, yes, but it's like the character I really feel bad for is Hades.
I think you're supposed to. There's this redemption of freaking Hades. Like the video game does the same thing.
At the same time, he's framed so much as the rich white industrialist.
Yeah.
That I'm like, there's very clearly supposed to be a bias here.
You know what? This is one of those plays where I think you could actually take it and reimagine it and do something more interesting. I mean, if you look at the places they workshopped and showcased this musical are so very strange. Because they worked.
Where was it?
Well, they did an off-Broadway run.
Of course. Right?
That's where it officially premiered. But the original version premiered in Barrie, Vermont. I've been to Barrie, Vermont. Barrie, Vermont is like, it's outside of Burlington.
And
it's like crack addicts are shuffling around on the street. But then they workshopped it in Edmonton. And I wonder if they were trying to kind of be, the industrialist thing. Because like Edmonton's probably the most liberal place in Alberta, but it's still Alberta.
And see, that's the thing, is I can feel the political leaning of it. Yeah. And that really frustrates me, because it's like,
well, in that backdrop, you definitely see that they had an intended audience in mind. Okay, it might be in Barrie, they could just get the space cheap, like there's all these arts grants in Vermont because they have a brain drain. But Barrie, I mean, Montpelier is more Montpelier on the side of Burlington is more the hub for that. There is a theory in Barrie. It's right down the street from where I discovered the concept of meat bingo. But it's this old church that does plays. So maybe that's where they did it. But yeah, the way the fact that they did it in Edmonton, maybe at the Fringe, it's an interesting place for it.
And I mean, the whole thing is very rise up.
Yeah.
And rebel, essentially. And it's like that's one of the things for me where it's like, Hades is so bad because he signs these people to these contracts and they lose themselves working. But it's like, he straight up says, everything and everyone in Hades Town I own, but I only buy what others are willing to sell. And it's like, you're treating him like this slave master, but he straight up says everyone agreed to it. And it's like,
except Persephone.
Well, but at the same time, it's all a reaction to the fact that he misses Persephone. And he's trying, he's essentially, he's so afraid, it's like Orpheus says, he thinks of the woman he loves in the arms of the sun, and he's terrified she won't come back. And so he's trying to do all these things to impress her and to say, do you see how much I love you? Please want to come back with me. And there's the miscommunication that he doesn't understand that what he's doing is pushing her away.
Yeah, it's Phantom of the Opera all over again. It's the romanticized Phantom of the Opera.
It is. And there's so many points where Persephone is just so bitter and so angry and so drunk.
See, I like that element. I thought that it was, I have a real issue with people trying to torque that particular myth, because they're trying to put a moral on something that just basically explained why we have seasons.
And I think if it were like any other couple, I'd be okay, but like, let me have my romantic Hades and Persephone dark boy light girl romance, please.
And you know what? You can do that, but the way I do it personally is, let's face it, she's going back down there on a technicality. It's do you know the Mario conspiracy theory?
That Peach wants to be kidnapped by Bowser?
Right. That Bowser and Peach secretly have a thing, and so we're gonna kidnap you, wink. Right? Yeah. And Luigi is their inside man, letting Bowser know when it's a good time to come grab her.
That's kind of how I like my Hades and Persephone.
But that's, I laugh at that, because that's one of those things where it's like, yeah, that makes more sense than canon. I'm down with that. And they're like, why are you sexualizing things for children? It's like, because people fucking do, man. Look at the number of fetishes with, like, littles.
And like, here's the thing. And coming back to Velma for a minute.
Yeah, that's doing it wrong.
So here's the thing. I've mentioned I'm not fond of race swaps, just as a principle. I think make a new character, do something different.
Yeah.
But with Scooby-Doo, Daphne and Velma feel like a very important crossroads for any feminine attracted person.
Fuck yes.
It's you this is a crossroads in your life where you have to decide, do you like the high maintenance diva or do you like the nerdy girl?
That's so interesting that Daphne is now a diva, because
diva isn't quite the right word, but it's like the put together glamour
normal girl. Like, okay, Daphne is you, Velma is me.
Like, exactly. So it's like, do you like the girly girl who's put together and dresses up, or do you like the nerdy girl? And so it's a very base thing. It's very formative. So the moment they messed with that and started with the race bends, I'm like, look, on one hand, I think people need to chill out about a lot of race bends. But at the same time, this is one where you are really messing with people.
I don't have a problem with the race bends so much as they just made Velma a horror.
And like, for me, I don't like Mindy Kaling.
Well, yeah, but I mean, Mindy Kaling is a horrible person.
Yeah.
Okay. So they made Velma Mindy Kaling.
And that's why I totally buy this being her pet project, because I'm like, yeah, this feels like
but let's face it, this isn't, race swap aside, I could live with the race swap. It's like, I don't care what color Velma's skin is, because we are all Velma. But
it's like, just what I mean is, it's like, I understand
Velma. It's not Velma anymore. They crossed a line where the essential characteristics of the character, because the thing that I always loved about Velma is that she was this, how do I put this? She didn't get, you got Shaggy and Scooby all over the place going, Zoinks, oh my God, Scoob, and Velma was always just very matter of fact. She was sort of the why ace characters are sexy sometimes thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
and also she was
like
the nerdy girl who wasn't shamed for it and didn't have to have a sexy makeover in order to be seen as attractive.
Well, it was the odd person out on the Mystery Machine crew is Freddie.
Mm-hmm.
Because Daphne and Velma, they work together, right? Mm-hmm. I loved that, okay, there was Velma for the type of girl that I got was what you were supposed to be, and I was never going to be. Daphne. And then you had Velma, who, why did she belong? Because she was smart and because she was logical and she didn't respond emotionally to things. And I thought that was fucking awesome. And they make her this bitter, monstrous, angry, nasty, violent thing. And it's taking away what's awesome about Velma.
Yeah.
And yes, I mean, I don't like that they put Scooby-Doo in the drug culture, because I do think that is like, yes, okay, they made Shaggy look kind of like a hippie because of the time.
At the same time, it's always been, in a way, it's always been subtext.
And I prefer it as subtext.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's also, because that was a thing in the 70s, it's like, just because you dressed and even sometimes acted like that didn't necessarily mean you were involved in the drug culture. It was just,
well, most
because they're all teenagers.
Yeah.
I'm like, I've seen the theory that the only reason Fred is there is, one, because he's the one with a driver's license, and two, he wants to impress Daphne,
and three, he's closeted gay. Fred's just not enough of a misfit to, like, you know, Daphne's the kind of girl who's got it all together, but she doesn't want to hang with the popular people. So she hangs out with the nerds and kind of makes it work, because she's got some deep dark, like, the one who'd be secretly angry at the friggin' world would be Daphne, not Velma.
It's actually an interesting take to actually.
Oh my God. Daphne, in my head, and maybe this is just saying way too much about me, she's the one wearing like PVC bondage gear for herself at home and just going through all these people she'd just like to whip. Like, you know, like, being, you know better than anybody, portraying that image to the world takes a lot of work.
Oh yeah.
And it is a deliberate act. And I just think Daphne gets so glossed over because she's the pretty girl. And I love the way they draw her with those very feminine, I want them to lean into that and say something about that, not make her fucking mean girl popular orphan. What? Like, she's fucking, what's her name from Stargirl? She's Cindy from Stargirl. Like, they're just crazy rich Asianing these IPs where it doesn't belong. And it's the Dragon Lady. Cindy Berman is literally the Dragon Lady trope. And I'm really surprised more people didn't call Stargirl on it. I think not enough people watched Stargirl. And Cindy eventually redeems, and it's cool. And I don't mind it. And this is one of these things where Stargirl's a great series, by the way. It ends in a way that was a bit of a sour note for me, but they rushed it. They had to get it done. But it's one of the better things Geoff Johns has done in like moving picture media. But that's an example of, I don't mind the tropiness where the characters start, because they do the BioWare thing of, okay, they're one thing. We're going to show you how they're another thing and another thing and another thing. And I thought that worked.
And that's what so many people don't understand about tropes is I see and I've talked about this before, I see so many people who start with a trope character and they're like, okay, that's my character. And I'm like, okay, but what are you doing with them?
Right.
Like, this is generic fantasy schlock. Not even schlock, because schlock can be a compliment. But it's like, this is a generic cardboard cutout. What are you actually doing with them? Oh, well, I'll stick on this kind of counterintuitive trait and see now they're no, they are not a full fleshed out person now, because you are not developing them as a person.
That's hacky.
And that was the big problem with that stupid High Guardian Spice cartoon, is that because I didn't watch that one, but
I am not familiar with this one. I was years late to the Owl House. Okay, I don't know from cartoon stuff.
Okay, so
I was very late to Arcane as well. I've still not watched the Cyberpunk or the Dragon Age cartoon. I know I have to, but time.
So Crunchyroll decided to make their own cartoon.
Oh, this thing. Okay. Okay.
So it came out in 2021, I think. And I did not watch it, but I watched enough reviews and essays on it that I feel I can give a mostly accurate opinion.
Yeah, see, I mostly take people's word for it because I'm so not the audience for that stuff.
Yeah.
So if the target audience says it's bad, it's bad. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. And I saw storytellers who were like, here's why it's bad. I saw trans people who were like, this is why it's bad. Queer people who were all just like, this is why I don't like it. And I don't like the way they're conveying this. There were a few things that people were like, okay, the story element is interesting. Like there is one character who is questioning his gender. And will probably become she by the end, or they, something. And like generally that storyline is acknowledged as being pretty well done.
The interesting thing about those storylines, I've never seen one that really honestly and of course there are multiple stories there, right? But we're not at the point where we can truly show the ugliness of the process of realizing that you are not cisgender. You do some fucking horrible shit while you're working it out.
Yeah. But the writing overall is so hackneyed. Right. And it is, again, it's these basic characters like, here's my elven archer and I made her brown, and I'm like, that's not a personality trait.
Was it originally in English?
Okay. And that was part of why people got mad about it, like even aside from what some would describe as, I'm not gonna say woke because I know you don't like that term. The only other thing I can think of is like SJW elements, but that's not quite right either.
They were shoehorning a message.
Yes. Right. So even beyond the shoehorned message, people were like, I'm sorry, I thought we were paying you a subscription so you could pay the animators in Japan more money. And so to find out that they were using those funds to fund their own cartoon, a lot of people got upset about that.
I can see that complaint. Okay, that makes sense to me.
And then again, there was all these, and they talked about, oh, we have one of the most diverse writing rooms. It's all women.
The misuse of the term diverse.
Exactly. And it was all these things where it's like, oh, we're an all women writing room and we're doing this and doing that. And there was some controversies with people involved as well. It was
I don't see why. I know I'm changing the subject a little bit here. I don't see why an all women writing room is in terms of more, you know, I'm very big on moral assessments. That is an amoral point. Like if you want to say, okay, we are doing a thing where it's an all-female writing room as an experiment for this particular story. Any inherent virtue in an all-female writing room, I reject that premise, because if your goal is diversity, you actually need diversity. The importance of diversity is the willingness to have the fights.
Well, the interesting thing, the show creator was a trans man.
Oh, that's interesting. So it wasn't an all-female writing room.
Apparently not. I guess there's a difference between showrunner and writing room in their opinion.
Usually the showrunner's the writing room.
I know that. And you know that.
Ooh, okay, well, that just shows you the muddled philosophy behind this stuff. I mean, I'm getting tingles of The Witcher Netflix at this point.
And, you know, we've talked about this before privately, you know, in the 1930s, they did the movie The Women.
Yes.
Which Was it an, I don't think it was an all-female crew on that one.
It I mean, any female inclusion behind the scenes back then was a big ass deal.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that was a production that was mostly women, and they were specific. It was an all-female cast.
That was
so
a big
it's like
deal.
Yeah. So, but like if you're writing a cast that has men and women, you should probably have men and women in your writing room as well as anything else in between.
Yeah, and you know what? It matters. I'm sticking on this just because of my own trauma with this stuff, because I believe very much about diversity of viewpoint and diversity of experience in writing. And I do think that if you're representing characters, the people with those experiences should be represented in the writer's room. And if you don't have a writer actually doing the writing, there should at least be people there during the story brainstorming sessions to go, that's not the way it works. And I think that some of these shows miss it's interesting because some of the shows, they have men there, but those men are a particular type of man. And so they have been hot take. The men in these writing rooms are very, very privileged. They tend to be friends or family of people who are very established in the business. And so they don't know what it's like to be a regular Joe Schmo, right? And so you get the Kevin Feiges of the world with something like She-Hulk, where it's like, I'm fine with this, so everybody else can just quit their whining. But Kevin Feige is a guy with a lot of power. It's like they didn't have anybody on that show who wasn't that type of man. And so they didn't know how it was going to land with guys who weren't masters of their own universes. And I thought that's really interesting. The problem with She-Hulk wasn't the female perspective. It was somebody saying, hey guys, do you realize how this is going to be interpreted by guys who think they've never even had a woman look at them? And if they go, yeah, okay, considered rejected, we don't care, that's fine. But I don't see that in the show. I see the complete lack of, like, there was no pug in the writing room of that show. There was no guy who, is the awesome dude that everyone went, that dude's a keeper. He told her where to go to the good poop bathroom on the first day. There was nobody representing that point of view going, hey, maybe this guy should be elevated a bit more. But that's a problem with the Marvel stuff in general. I find they don't realize how important the Darcy's, the Jimmy Woos, the poop bathroom guy are to the story, right? They're so, and it's funny because they go on and on and on about allies, but they don't realize how important in female-centered media that guy being there doing the Shakespearean thing of, you've got the commoner telling the audience what they're supposed to think about what's just happened and what's to come at the beginning of Act 3, Scene 1, right? Whether it's the witches, whether it's the porter, that's what they were there for, this is what you're supposed to think. And it was that moment that, because it was so boom, the nobles recognized they had to sit there and take it like a celebrity roast so that the commoners in the pit got a laugh at the poop and dick jokes before they did the big lofty speech and the moralizing and like all that stuff. And it's like, that's been lost. The true challenge of mass entertainment has been lost because the guys making the decisions on these things are so out of touch with most. California's got that problem, right? New York, California, Chicago have that problem. They have absolutely no idea how the rest of the country and the rest of the world lives. And the people who end up writing these shows are in these ecosystems, because you have to hang out to make the right friends, to say the right things, to make even better friends, to get these opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
They're so out of touch with how this stuff is going to be received. And it bothers me because the women creators and the trans creators and the Black people and the Asian people, they're the ones that get blamed for the hot mess. And the problem, the breakdown, is really at the Kevin Feige, the straight cisgender white guy in the process, who doesn't go because they want to show what a good person they are. They are honest and they don't go, okay, I need to take 10 minutes and play devil's advocate with this thing, just so you know.
And like that's one of the problems with Eternals, where it had a female director. And so there are people who wonder, did it get through just because no one wanted to tell a female director no?
Okay, I will say though, with the Disney process in general, they try not to micromanage their directors. That's why Joss Whedon got so much power. It started with Pirates of the Caribbean, right? They did a whole bunch of things that they thought were going to be terrible, and it turned out to be amazing. Like, everybody knows how Johnny Depp just went totally bonkers with the look of Jack Sparrow on that one, and everybody was like, I don't know, and people turned out to love it.
That's what happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's part of what happened with Star Wars too. And as I've said before, how did The Last Jedi happen?
Rian Johnson, there was no top-down strategy. So yeah.
And that's what's the other thing I've seen it with, where it's
generally they leave the directors alone as long as they've incorporated the larger story plots that they have to lay out for their next chapter. As long as they do that, they're like, Disney is really, really good at empowering the people who work for them. And I say this as somebody who's done a little bit of work for Disney. They are a really good company to work with. There's all this talk about the evils and how much power they have. They're aware of how big they are. And so they try to leave people alone when they seem to know what they're doing. Most of the time that works out really well. Sometimes you get the Eternals and the John Carter marketing, which is horrible. The movie was good.
The John Carter movie?
Oh, the John Carter movie. I love the John Carter movie. As a fan of the books, I thought it was the best PG John Carter movie they could have possibly made.
PG John Carter. I don't like some of the choices they made with that movie. And I
mean, Dejah Thoris is kind of a scientist in the books. The big problem
my problem wasn't even Dejah Thoris. It was especially towards the end where like they changed him going back and like the creatures showing up on Earth.
Like, oh wow, I don't even remember that. I just remember all the stuff on Barsoom. I think I might have blanked that.
Yeah, there's a point where things get weird towards the end and they start messing with the chronology of the first book, and I'm like, no, what are you doing?
See, I didn't think they'd go with the male lead running around naked in a John Carter movie, and
obviously not.
They managed it.
Obviously not. We couldn't even get that on the covers. And
but in the books, that is how he's described.
Yes. And that's part of what Edgar Rice Burroughs was doing. Was he was creating this almost Eden.
He was fat when he went over and served in the US Southwest. He became absolutely enamored with, I don't know the correct term for it down in the US, but we call them the indigenous people.
Yeah.
Red Martians are Native Americans. And the problem with that is that how do you do that with a story that's focused on a white person? Dances with Wolves doesn't hold up real well.
And I mean,
it's the same thing.
It is absolutely a white savior narrative.
Well, in a way it's not though, right? Because I always got the sense with the books, because he doesn't do it alone. And the thing I liked about the story is he shows up and he doesn't speak the language. He doesn't have control over his powers. And so he's not the guy that swoops in and saves them. He has to learn enough about the culture to aid them in their struggle. And that's what I liked about what they preserved with the movie. It wasn't, yes, they used his particular physical abilities from coming from a place with stronger gravity.
Yeah. And there was an actual explanation for all his spectacular powers, but essentially.
He did not come in and save and civilize the savages. And that's what made me so very happy, because Edgar Rice Burroughs stands out. I mean, yes, it's science fiction, but he stands out in that way of, yes, he ends up marrying the princess and all that stuff. I mean, Planet Hulk and World War Hulk is Marvel doing Edgar Rice Burroughs. That is what it is. They are doing John Carter of Mars with the Hulk.
It was also 1913.
But the fact that he doesn't, there's very clearly that he is a perpetual guest. He can't just go in and take it all over. He becomes a better Martian than he assimilates to their culture. He doesn't civilize them to his. And I fucking love that about those stories.
And that is the difference.
Well, people get all over what's problematic from the time. They never, because they don't read Edgar Rice Burroughs. They see the naked chick and go, oh, it must be bad. They don't recognize that is them challenging. And for people who don't know, the Leia bikini in Return of the Jedi is also inspired by Dejah Thoris. But they don't recognize that what Burroughs was doing is actually criticizing European culture and Puritan attitudes, and the fact that they're all bundled up to the neck in itchy wool even in the summer. He was challenging the status quo, not going, look at these savages that need to be. No, he was actually saying their culture was better.
Yeah. And, I saw a discussion on romance novels recently. Okay. So the romance books subreddit, I'm getting really frustrated by how much the moderators are like, oh, people need to actively read more queer romances.
I'm sorry, I heard romance authors subreddit and actually stopped breathing for a moment.
No, not even romance authors. These are just readers. It's romance books.
That's worse. Oh my God, I can't. I don't know how you stomach that.
Barely.
Those romance reader, because like fandom subreddits are awful. Fandom, like genre fandom subreddits are awful. Romance, I cannot imagine. This is my hell. This is my personal hell you're about to describe.
Yeah. So the moderators have been posting like, oh, it's very important that we broaden our horizons and read more stories of people who, basically they're saying read more queer romance.
Oh dear God.
And read more non-binary romance. And there was a post about a book recently, and at first I was like really excited by the concept, and then I saw that it was MM. So like it's a gay romance, and I'm like, I that just does not do anything for me.
Some of the stuff Jane Jensen's done, sorry, I forget her pen name, but some of the stuff she's done has been all right. I sampled it because it was Jane Jensen.
Yeah, it's never done anything for me. And I think it's because I like that.
It's not your thing.
Exactly. But so there was a comment a little way down where someone said, oh, I was really invested until I found out it's MM. I might read it later, but it's just not for me. I responded to it because I was like, yeah, same thing. I love the concept, but same thing. It doesn't do anything for me. Our comments got deleted for not being inclusive enough.
Wait, because you were stating a personal preference?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
And this is why I stopped breathing for a moment. I kind of guessed what was coming.
And it's also like it's romance novels. This is escapism. But the reason I bring this up,
people commenting on romance novels, you have to have, excuse me for the shitty term, but a safe space to be vulnerable about what you find romantic.
Exactly. And it's like this is a page where like they are very open to talking about like dark romance and weird kinks and stuff, but the moment you say anything that they might even possibly suspect as being non-inclusive or not fitting into their politics.
Wait, a romance board?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, PC has to stop at the door.
I know, right?
Oh, you can't. You can't. You are when you are dealing with fantasy, you have to go to another place in your brain.
Yeah, it and that's why I get so frustrated with the idea of all art has to be political. I spent years burned out from following politics and following Comicsgate and following all this and that. And eventually I stopped because, you know, I've talked about, I started getting mad at any mention of Star Wars.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And that was about the time I started following you. And I'm like, oh my God, it's sense.
I am, I mean, one of the things that I am frustrated by right now is we're going through another phase where people just seem to have a hive of bees up their ass. Like, people can't chill. People don't have a sense of humor about things. And one thing I will fight for is the right, because, you know, if I can't couch things in humor, I sound like Kratos. Humor is my way of code switching from the fact that all this stuff that people fight about seems extremely simple to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care to debate it because it's not something worthy of debate.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, I spent a lot of time interviewing porn stars for a living, and it's weird because I don't understand commercial porn. I don't get why people find it interesting or arousing or some sort of aid in that way, but I have no moral objection to it, and I watched a shit ton of it for work. But that's where I realized, you know, what I find sexy is very, very different from what the average person finds sexy. And you know, what I love is those scenes where I love the awkward guy seeming vulnerable and being adorable thing. The Tom Holland thing, you know, was probably a dead giveaway there. But I mean, one of my favorite scenes in the Loki Disney Plus show was that scene on the train where he gets bombed on champagne and he's falling all over himself and giggling. And it just felt like the scene Tom Hiddleston had always wanted to do with that character. He just seemed to be, I mean, the fact that he gets to do pratfalls. Everybody who does that training wants to use it. It's so fun, even though it hurts like hell. But it was just such a moment where, oh my God, he's not overthinking everything. He's a happy drunk. That's interesting. Because it's such a juxtaposition where he's sitting there pretending to be Odin and watching this play about his greatness and bored out of his fucking mind. And it was like that moment where the illusion dropped, and that's who he is. And it's like, but of course, this is the one thing he can't be in his culture, right? A goofy, kind of cuddly, kind of sad guy who really, really needs a hug, right? Because he wants to go around going, I love you, man. Right, you know, and that, you don't get that in romance stories ever.
No,
you know, that you have to read kind of the gay fiction to get that type of character because it's so subversive in terms of gender roles.
And I mean, things have been expanding and there is more variety.
Yeah, but the thing is that if that is, because of course I think that's why I kind of, even though, well, I think they present the idea of being gender fluid wrong in that show. I was really bothered by that because that's, the TVA is an abusive organization. We see that, yes, but they're assigning a gender identity to him. He's not picking it. And we've never seen Lady Loki.
Also, here's the thing, just because someone is a shapeshifter
doesn't mean that's their identity. That's a performance. Exactly. And I was really upset because I mean, daddy issues. If he was actually a they, he would have fewer daddy issues.
I know, right?
Because he does so identify with his mother. And that's one of the things about the construct of the character. If he can just be, okay, I'm not Odin's son, I'm Freya's son, maybe Freya not son, boom, he's a lot happier. That's not him.
Yeah.
Right? Just because there are variants that are not male doesn't mean that him as an individual is gender fluid. They'd be, it should be gender variable, because Sylvie's very clearly just female. And that's like that's showing gender identity wrong. And I was so goddamn pissed because that, first of all, it's wrong. And we have so many problems with people thinking that gender identity is not a concrete thing that you can understand. It's just a feeling, and it's not. And you can't explain to someone. Generally, people do not like to lie. And so when you are constantly feeling like when you give your gender, you are lying to someone, it really fucks with you long term.
Do you remember, this was like 10 plus years back, I think, more than that. There was a journalist, I believe, who went undercover as a man, and like she was living as a man for quite a while, and she was going to like retreats for men and just trying to get the male experience. And it broke her. Like she couldn't handle the lie. She couldn't handle the pressure. She did a whole book on it, and I didn't actually read the book because it just sounded like too much pain for me.
You cannot live your life feeling like you're lying to everyone around you, including yourself.
And there was a point where apparently there was a point where she was literally asking people to hurt her. Like just to smack her or whatever, because she couldn't handle it anymore.
And I mean, I think people can take any shapeshifter as any. I mean, this is why people get so fucking mad about J.K. Rowling, is she put in that polyjuice potion and the idea that men can have female, inner spirits. Now she's this horrendous, no, gender's in the body. Like, have you read your own book, woman? And that's why I just, mock a lot instead of getting really, really angry. But
and like, I don't think she's even thought through what, I don't think she's even aware of what she did with Snape's Patronus.
No, she was so fucking stupid. The costume designers understood what they were doing because they have female puff sleeves on his costume. I thought it's a Vickers coat, but it's got puff sleeves. It doesn't have that nicely squared shoulder.
Okay, but I don't even trust that the costume designers knew what they were doing.
Oh, I think it's just they used the same fabric on Lucius Malfoy's vest as they used on Sirius Black's pants. And it is a red stripe in the fabric that you absolutely cannot see on camera because they use that green tint, so it just fades to brown, right? And then the fact that they put Dumbledore in lavender.
True.
Like, they knew what they were doing, the costumers, the set designers, and that's why I sort of understand. We're going to talk about this more in subsequent weeks. We're going to have a guest coming on the show to talk about this, an actual trans woman, to talk about the Hogwarts legacy thing and all that stuff. But the universe of Harry Potter, and quite frankly, anything. I mean, I juxtapose this with Doctor Strange, that I'm a big fan of the comics, but of course, Steve Ditko was a brilliant artist and a really unhappy person. And he had a particular view of objectivism that a lot of people would have a problem with. Am I supposed to deny that he revolutionized comic book art and a huge part of the mind-bendingness of Doctor Strange? The only reason to really like Doctor Strange is kind of what Ditko did with the world, with that sort of mind-bending, reality-altering panel design that he did. Am I supposed to throw that all out because he was a shitty human being? I can't.
I mean, we would have to throw away a whole heck of a lot.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of there's a difference between, and this is getting back to sort of the representation, and if you want to do a queer read on a character, and this is why I defend queer reads, right? If you in your mind want to think that, you know, Bucky is gay and secretly pining for Steve and Sam, go for it. There's nothing to invalidate that. Making it canon denies other people the right to have another take on it. And I like art that allows people those different interpretations with no one right answer.
I think part of why I don't like it so much is because, again, I've spent a lot of time in fandom where it, instead of being some kind of this is how the character reads, it's really just fangirls who want guys to bang.
And it's the incest slash from Supernatural.
Yeah.
Like, that was so fucked up.
And, you know, I've mentioned even with Frozen, the pairing with the most fanfic and even fan art to this day is still Anna and Elsa.
Which, I mean, the thing I loved about Frozen is it was a story about sisters. Instead of falling in love with the prince. I enjoyed that.
I will say I do not blame Chris Sanders at all for being annoyed and being like, oh, Frozen got all this credit for being a story about sisters when Lilo and Stitch did it first.
Lilo and Stitch just left out of every discussion about anything. And you know I love freaking Stitch.
Of course you do.
Lilo and Stitch was such a perfect... It was an important movie in a lot of ways. First of all, non-white leads. Nobody talks about that. Set in Hawaii. They're Polynesian.
So, I want to bring this up really quick because Chris Sanders loves Hawaii.
Yeah.
And he does in particular have a thing for Polynesian women. And like when you see his art, it becomes kind of obvious. And he does
legs.
Yeah, he does do a lot of good girl art.
Yes.
And I saw someone say once, oh, in one case, the way he draws Nani as an individual situation, that's great because it's representation. But the fact he draws so many women who looks like this, that turns it into fetish.
No, I disagree. That's what he thinks is beautiful.
Yeah, that's, and I think there is a huge difference between having a preference in a look and having a fetish.
I agree.
And it's like we see a lot of anime fans, otaku, who do fetishize Asian women, but that doesn't mean all people who find Asian women especially attractive are fetishizing them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't consider my preference for guys that are not. I gotta go for guys who are not so much like me. I think that's what it comes down to. So, you know, guys who will light it up, be goofy, be softer, like not have that inner Kratos. That's not a fetish, because that suggests it's somehow, because the fetish is the sexualization of something that's not sexual, right? It's an indirect thing.
It's an adoration.
Yeah, I will not give up the idea that no, guys like that are just as valid and attractive as the stuff that gets shoved on us all the fucking time.
Yeah. And I will say though, Chris Sanders and Dean DeBlois also did How to Train Your Dragon after they did Lilo and Stitch.
No, that I didn't know that was him.
And there's this one sketch Chris Sanders did of Astrid where she's more in his style, where she's got the big curly blonde hair. I'm gonna have to send it to you. And he had to be very clear, like, this was never a concept design. We never considered this as Astrid's design, but it's like she's still got like the thighs and some curves, and I'm like, I would have loved that as Astrid.
Well, it's the same way The Thing was Jack Kirby's self-insert, and he used to draw like bar mitzvah cards with The Thing in a kippah and a tallis, right? And they've sort of pulled that into continuity some, but I mean, I think this is the problem with everything being with so much information being available, and it being just poured over and analyzed like biblical text, constitutional law, picking out a comma, picking out a particular word and running with it.
I've still had people argue with me that Peter Parker has to be Jewish.
Nope.
Because Stan Lee was Jewish. And it's like, no, there are quite a few Jewish characters in the Marvel comics because the creators were. But it's like,
the Irish and the Jews grew up in New York cheek to jowl, and that's what Peter Parker's about.
Exactly. Yeah. And just to see people, it's like, look, I get you want representation, and sometimes it's not even the people who want to feel represented. It's just the people who are on this bandwagon of diversity and representation when they're white, and it's like they're just trying to feel better about themselves.
Yeah.
And it's like, I need you to chill out, and I need you to accept that a Jewish writer can write a non-Jewish character.
And I mean, these theories are going to be sorely tested, right? Because we've got some video game adaptations, and I think the reason that video game to movie or TV adaptations don't work is it's inherently a step down. You are losing elements of the work. You're taking out the interactivity, and therefore it's always going to feel like something's missing.
At the same time, so many of them are bad, because like I watched the Assassin's Creed movie.
It had moments where I'm like, that was probably the first draft of the script before all the Hollywood types go, this is a movie, not a video game. Like, that's the scenes in the past are amazing. The overcomplicated stuff in the present, oh Lord.
It also just looked so bad and so dirty.
It was murky.
I was sitting there going, I could write a better Assassin's Creed movie. I haven't even played the games, and I can still write a better one.
But you know what the problem with the Assassin's Creed movie was? As somebody who's played the games, they fucking whitewashed it.
That too.
Assassin's Creed from the beginning has always focused around non-white main characters. Even Assassin's Creed 2, that whole Assassin's Creed 2, all 5 games, where
my best friend is currently replaying the Ezio collection.
Yeah, but
so he's having so much fun with it.
They're great games, and yes, they're set in Italy, but Italy wasn't WASP for one, but also the whole shtick with the original Assassin's Creed run was that the guy in the present, Desmond Miles, was about as mixed race as you come. And that's why he's like the patient zero of the Animus. They could pull so many ancestors from him because he was such a human melting pot.
I also want to say this is just like a bit of a random hot take. I saw someone complaining that there's it's not Ezio, but there's another character where like there's a DLC where he sleeps with a woman up on like top of a clock tower or something, and the memory ends there, and the implication is that she got pregnant with the child that would become the modern character's ancestor,
right?
And I saw someone complain, that's just weird that the genetic memory stops there, and I'm like, no, that actually makes perfect sense,
because that's where that person's life began.
Exactly. So it's like there's no more genetic memory because now they have their own genetics. And I'm like, that's actually a great attention to detail. But unlike the people who are complaining, oh, why can't Cassandra be lesbian canonically? Well, because she has to have a kid.
Okay, also, she's Spartan. She's a fucking Spartan. They separated sex and love. Holy fucking shit, that made me mad. Which takes me to the big oops that we're on the precipice of regarding video game to TV show adaptations. The God of War show.
Oh my God.
Kratos
here's the thing. I want their...
But sorry. Kratos has canonically been played all through the history of the series by a black man. So I argue that if they do not cast a black man as Kratos, they are race swapping the character. They are changing the intrinsic coding of Kratos as a perpetual outsider to every culture he's a part of. Yes, he was born a Spartan, but his experiences separate him from other people. And whether it was in T.C. Carson before Chris Judge, I mean, I think if it's not Chris Judge, they're doing something wrong. Right. Oh, yeah. But Kratos must be black. He always has been. And I have heard the weirdest excuses for why it can't be, including, yeah, but then it would be weird to paint him with the ashes of his wife and child. Well, that's canonical. Anybody who plays that part is going to have to do the makeup. That's not skin. That is not the color of his skin. They show him in a flashback in one game with the skin and it looks fucking weird, man. But Kratos is, in terms of his characterization, black. If they don't cast a black actor for that part, they're race swapping the core of the character. And if there isn't similar freaking out, now I think people are going to freak out if it's anybody but Chris Judge.
I will.
So I think there will be.
Play the games.
I mean, this is something that shows what a hot mess the video game industry is in general, right? We are at a moment, think about this, because the whole Oscars so white, parts for black men in media, we are at a point in the video game industry where the most celebrated actor, lead actor anywhere is a black man. And nobody's saying anything about it. That's amazing. That's
who is it?
Integration. Well, Christopher Judge.
Okay.
Like everybody's like, no, there's nobody else. He's the guy. He's the pinnacle of the industry. He's the dude.
And like, I know him as Teal'c
from Stargate.
Yeah.
But I mean, everybody's just like, no, dude's the shit. Like, dude is good. Everybody's putting this dude up on their shoulders. A black man. And for all the forced shit that the games press has been putting on people, this is a dude who just went for it and was awesome. And everybody's like, fuck yes. And, you know, it just happened. And no one's remarking on it. And I'm almost afraid to say something because the minute you point out, hey, the most celebrated, like, lionized actor in all the video games right now is a black dude, then it's going to be a thing. But it happened. And I think he deserves a shit ton of credit for going for it, right? Not pulling the, oh, it's just a video game. But you also look at games like the Far Cry series, right? Where except for that one game, Far Cry 5, that was set in, I think it was Montana, they've all been other places where the cast has been primarily non-white, either Latin or with Black Hispanic people, or when you have Far Cry Primal, you know, the majority of that cast was Black. This is actually the industry just going, we are going to create stories and it's going to be awesome. Not, we need to shoehorn so-called diversity. And it's really not the stuff that people, when you say, you know, when I'm like, that's not diversity. When most people talk about diversity, what they're actually engaging in is tokenism.
Exactly. And I think that is what bothers me about when I see race swapping, is because, okay, what does that do for the character? Like, are you actually working with that? Are you trying to say something or do something, or are you just doing it for brownie points?
And you know what? I think that when it works, like Sam Jackson is Nick Fury, for example, right? Once, if it works, that's why I wish people would wait for the stuff to come out before they freak out. Because every so often it does work and it's fine, right? I mean, Oscar Isaacs is not Jewish. He's great at Moon Knight. I don't fucking care, right?
Yeah.
But every so often we get a race swap like Nick Fury. And nobody can imagine anybody but Samuel L. Jackson in the part.
Okay, so I mean, admittedly, that one has, because when they started the Ultimate Universe,
right,
they went to Sam Jackson and said, "Hey, can we use your likeness for this alternate version of Nick Fury?" And he said, "As long as I get to play him in the movies."
And he's amazing.
Yeah. And it's like, so that was set up beforehand, but it's like,
but I mean, yeah. Nick Fury was previously played by David Hasselhoff. And it was bad, right? And that's the thing. When something just, when you can believe that this was a person who was legitimately the guy to play them, like that, for example. But I mean, you know, you look at even different iterations of a character. The Aquaman's a race swap. Aquaman's not Polynesian, but nobody fucking cares, right? I mean, the Aquaman script isn't great, the characterization isn't, but the look.
At the same time, like when it was first announced, I thought they were going to go like all Polynesian for the cast.
I would have been down with that.
Like that would have made total sense to me
because of where they are in the ocean.
Exactly. And it's like, you know, the idea that maybe our modern day Polynesians and, you know, the Wayfinders and everything, they were Atlanteans who came to the surface and said, "Hey, let's explore up here."
And I think with Namor, or Namor is now the proper pronunciation for it, but I think Marvel kind of went, yeah, DC missed that opportunity, we're going to do it.
I mean, for me, making it Latin seemed a bit odd, but okay.
Well, that's the thing. It's a change, but the original, I mean, let's face it, Namor, it's the word Roman scrambled. But, well, backward. No, yeah. Something like that. But also, I mean, he was Captain Nemo.
Yeah.
Right. He was really inspired by that. And that's a bit of a problem in retrospect because it's the evil, crazy Arab stereotype. And I liked what they did with it. It was a bit of a shoehorn on the pronunciation, but there's another guy. He fucking sold it, man. It's a ridiculous character. He's zooming around with little wings on his feet and he's rocking it. Like, talk about a guy who really managed a tragic, he was a tragic romantic lead, even though there wasn't a romance. And I really liked him.
Because Sue Storm hasn't shown up yet.
Well, and they had that thing with Shuri where they did this sort of kidnap princess trope, but didn't. There were a number of men in Wakanda Forever that served as foils for Shuri. That movie did a lot of really, really cool things that they didn't go, look at what we're doing. And so I think a lot of people missed it, but I enjoyed the hell out of some, just because, I mean, nobody wanted to make that movie, right? I think everybody wanted a Black Panther sequel with Chadwick Boseman. We couldn't have that.
And I mean, people threw a fit that, oh, they should have recast him. They were between a rock and a hard place. People would have complained if they recast him. People would complain if they didn't.
Well, it's a spoiler for me to comment on that for people who haven't seen the movie, and it kind of is important. It's a neat reveal. But it's another transitional franchise entry, much the way Falcon and Winter Soldier were.
Yeah.
And I get, because, you know, Chadwick Boseman said he'd be fine if somebody else played T'Challa. And you know, that again is, well, that's good. Obviously, he had reasons for saying that at the time he did. I think the way they handled it, I liked, because they're like, this mythos is more important than one guy. And go ahead, sorry.
Go on. I forgot what I was going
to say. They gave Angela Bassett some scenes where she could just Angela Bassett the shit out of the Angela Bassett. And I mean, she won a Golden Globe for a reason.
Oh, yeah.
No, there's Screen Actors. I don't remember what award it is. I don't watch award shows. I was very happy to see that.
Yeah.
But it's like,
there was an award. And it probably means more than an Oscar.
She won a thing, but you don't need an award to look at Angela Bassett's performance in, like, she had very little to do in the original Black Panther, but she had majesty in Wakanda Forever. Holy shit. They just she like does all of the Woman King in like 3 scenes.
And I mean, it seems like by not recasting T'Challa, it let there be more focus on the female characters. So you'd think that would be a plus.
Not just the female characters, right? It gave M'Baku a chance to be more fleshed out. It gave what's his name? It even gave the Contessa a bit of story. It gave I don't know his name, Martin Freeman. I love Martin Freeman, so he's just Martin Freeman in everything. But it gave him more to do. It gave and it also allowed us to see a bit more of the culture of Wakanda and how it works, and it dealt with some of the consequences of some of the choices T'Challa made, opening up.